Big time fight coming up this weekend at middleweight. We have ranked contenders, the Joker, Jack Hermansson, taking on, well, it isn't Oscar De La Hoya, although he might fight this summer. I don't really know. But the golden boy, Edmen Shahbazyan, and at some point you got to become the golden man. But this boy's been fighting since he was 9. He entered the gym. He started training with Ronda Rousey as a teenager. That's where everybody really heard of him. And yeah, Edmen got a little bit more shine than his brother did, Leon, and really we just haven't seen Leon on the big stage so much. But for Edmen, man, the guy looked like a force for a long time until his last fight. But even before then, great striker, has a bit of a Shotokan karate background. You see it with the kicks that he offers up. Great forward pressure. He's the type of guy that throws one of my favorite moves in all of MMA. Pop, pop. Going for the double jab. I love to see it. Edmen Shahbazyan, very, very effective use of the jab. Combined with his footwork, there's a lot of fundamentals that you can see that are there that were really pumped into him at a young age. And he's one of those new wave MMA fighters that we've seen. Opposite him, Jack Hermansson. This is a guy that when he beat Jacare the way that he beat him, now listen, Jacare wins, but the way that Jack Hermansson did it, that was the way. Like, that was crazy to see that. And then you look at the 5-on-in, so again, we get the win over David Branch, crazy. The win over Jacare, great. The loss to Jared Cannonier, yikes, because that was like a bit of a hometown crowd, and didn't go all that well for Jack. He beats Kelvin Gastelum quickly by heel hook, which was Kelvin off on that night? I don't know.
It was one position.
It was insane. And then he loses to Marvin Vettori. Now, Matt, this is the question that I have for you when I hand it off. Marvin Vettori fighting for the title coming up shortly. That was a fight where, did you lose stock in Hermansson in a loss, or was it just kind of a wash?
It's a great question because I think that Marvin Vettori finally showed us what we already knew in that fight. But it's weird because Jack Hermansson and Edmen Shahbazyan are both in a very similar point in their career. Because if you really want to overanalyze both guys, really just best wins, you can say, okay, Jack Hermansson beat up an old Jacare Souza, and he beat Kelvin Gastelum in one position. Because that fight came down to one position. Whether you think Gastelum was on or off that night, he got out-grappled by Jack Hermansson in a battle of leg locks. And yes, he should have been in that position to begin with, but if you're going to get into that kind of battle with Jack Hermansson, you're going to lose. I don't care who you are. Unless your name's Gordon Ryan, those just aren't the types of exchanges you're going to want to be getting in with Jack Hermansson. But I do feel like in Hermansson, you do have one of the more limited contenders, I would say, at the middleweight division. And let me just elaborate a little bit on that. When I think about the middleweight division, you have guys like Israel Adesanya, who is just this phenomenal striker. He's got great takedown defense.
At middleweight.
But he is really the only specialist at that weight division. You look at guys like Robert Whittaker, you look at guys like Kelvin Gastelum, guys like Darren Till, guys like Jared Cannonier, just anyone who is the top contender there. They're kind of good at everything. And the one thing that Jack Hermansson struggles with is the striking, which is weird because I would say the biggest showcase he's ever had in the UFC was, I guess, his striking against Jacare Souza. But if you go back and you look at that fight, he was able to out-volume Jacare, which is an impressive task, don't get me wrong, but that's the least impressive way to beat a guy like Jacare Souza. And I understand, beating a guy like Jacare for 25 minutes, there's going to be people out there, oh, Matt, how can you not be impressive? Just hear me out. It's not like he was able to draw Jacare, and he barely outstruck him. Like, he ate a bunch of big power shots from Jacare, and in the 4th and 5th round, Jacare was the one who was starting to make the fight close because Jack Hermansson had just got off to such a big lead in the first 3 rounds. And yes, Jack Hermansson is a good gas tank, don't get me wrong, and I'm not worried about him at all in a 3-round fight. But I just think with Jack Hermansson, it's not like he's Robert Whittaker. It's not like he's a fighter who, okay, every second I'm on the feet after worry because I can get knocked out. And oh my goodness, if he takes me down, he's this really good black belt and he can submit me. With Hermansson, you really only have to worry about the grappling when you are an elite fighter. And with Shahbazyan, it's weird, right? Because you have the weird fight against Darren Stewart. I know we've talked about that fight probably too much at this point, but just a weird fight where he was more of the wrestler in that matchup. And then you look at how good he looks against Brad Tavares, and you're like, wow, like, this guy has all the accuracy in the world and great power on his shots. What is his ceiling? Then you look at the Derek Brunson fight. And Derek Brunson's weird because is he a gatekeeper? Is he the best middleweight ever? Like, no one really knows.
Did we need to see another round of that fight?
Probably not. That fight definitely could have been stopped after the second. But Edmen gets off to a great start, starts looking good, and then the second round comes around, and it's not only that he started to get hit in that fight, it was that he started to tire as well. And once you mix in, well, head trauma with a poor gas tank, that is just a recipe for disaster. And I think we did see the limitations of Shahbazyan's game in that fight. But the weird thing, even going back to that fight, is Shahbazyan had success, and he always does have success in his fights. But I'm gonna, and again, I've gone on for a while, Craig, I apologize, but I'm gonna quote Teddy Atlas here. I think Edmen Shahbazyan has a little bit of like Mike Tyson quality in him, where when the going gets tough, he can't get tougher. And I talked about this with fighters all the time. There was a fighter last week, like Charles Oliveira, people said that about him until he was able to go out there and really prove the point otherwise. With Shahbazyan, I saw him panic wrestle a ton against Darren Stewart because he started to get hit on the feet. And I saw him panic against Derek Brunson and try to wrestle the guy who's a much better wrestler, who is Derek Brunson. My concern is that when Edmen Shahbazyan panics and goes back to what he is most basic at, or what his natural instincts are, well, you brought it up. He doesn't have a background in any singular martial art. This is the thing that I think about a lot. When guys get hurt or when guys panic, they do what their background is. There's guys who become panic wrestlers when they get hurt.
Shotokan karate.
Okay, but if Shotokan karate is your backup, then why is he going out there and knocking people out like Wonder Boy? My problem with Shahbazyan is he doesn't have that default to go back to. Edmen Shahbazyan's default is, well, striking, I would say, but even in striking, he's going to get outstruck by the top guys in the division. So with Shahbazyan, I think this really is one of those fights where I have this thought about Edmen Shahbazyan. I think he's a decent prospect with a ceiling of like maybe top 15 on his best day. If he goes out there and beats Jack Hermansson, let's say he knocks him out in the first round, I'm going to completely change my opinion on Edmen Shahbazyan. But as it stands right now, I got to be honest, I think he's a little bit too hyped up.
I have a really hard time with this fight because if you look at it from a pure numbers perspective, you got to consider the level of competition for Hermansson. He's been around with the company for longer. He's quite a bit older, 9 years older or thereabouts, and he's fought that high level. David Branch, double division champion with World Series, and yeah, his second UFC run wasn't very good. And yeah, Gerald Harris slam knocked him out the first time, but a good fighter on the ground. Jack Hermansson made it look like easy, like really, really easy. And you look at this fight, Shahbazyan has a negative strike differential in the UFC at negative 0.46. His 4.46 takedowns per 15 minutes, very impressive, or 4.44 at a 40% clip, and he's got 58% takedown defense. I don't know if I love that. You look at it for Hermansson, 75% takedown defense, 1.57 strike differential against heavy hitters and volume strikers. And yeah, his last time out, he fought both of those in Marvin Vettori. But Marvin Vettori's up here fighting for a title. Is Edmen Shahbazyan, like, is he right up there? I don't think so yet. That's why I have an issue with this one. So when I look at the odds, Hermansson opened a minus 115. He's a minus 158 right now. For Edmen, he opened a minus 105. He's a plus 130. The Tapology votes, not very close. 1,027 of them, 74% Hermansson, 63% by submission. For the 26% that have Edmen to win, 70% by knockout. It's a possibility. For Hermansson, he got knocked out by Cannonier. That was fairly quick, right? Quick enough. So it could happen. But again, I find myself leaning with the fighter out of Scandinavia in Jack Hermansson in this one because he's pretty well the complete package. He has great cardio. He can strike. His striking's not his best attribute, but he can strike. He gets hit. But again, positive strike differential. And in a fight like this, I still like him. But you might like Shahbazyan to get the win by knockout. I like Hermansson.
So this is the one thing about Jack Hermansson that we didn't even touch on yet. Jack Hermansson, it was weird. He was really famous for something until it felt like he got famous and people stopped talking about it. One of the best ground and pound fighters in the UFC. When he gets top position on guys, he makes them pay for it. And if you listen to any of his interviews, he talks about that. He loves ground and pound, and he is really good at getting into dominant positions. He doesn't just sit there. He postures up and he rains down on his opponents. We saw Derek Brunson, who, yes, he's the better wrestler than Jack Hermansson, but I would argue he's not as good of a grappler as Hermansson is after it hits the mat. We saw the level of success he was able to have against Shahbazyan on the mat. I think if Jack Hermansson gets one takedown in this fight, he's really going to be able to put enough damage on Shahbazyan to where we do see not the same fighter in that second and third round because he will be so tired or so damaged. The last thing, though, if Shahbazyan wins, it's going to be in the first round because Hermansson, the only thing he doesn't do all that well is he is hittable. Yes, he has a positive strike differential, but that's only because he has such a high level of volume himself. When he gets hit clean, and that does concern me in this matchup with Shahbazyan because Shahbazyan does have great accuracy. He does have good power early on in the fight, but other than that, like 3-minute window to start the fight, I do like Jack Hermansson.
Matt, both of us going with Jack Hermansson to get the win. Can't wait for the fight. Explosive middleweight action. We got a great fight in our main event of bantamweight. Rob Font taking on Cody Garbrandt. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.